making the headlines today. Over 2.5 million Johorians to vote in state polls tomorrow. Rebranded GDRN to optimize GLIC resources. The Election Commission today reminded all Johor voters who will cast their ballots in the state election tomorrow to comply with the standard operating procedures (SOPs). EC Secretary Dato' Ikmalruddin Ishak said this includes wearing a face mask, using hand sanitizer, checking body temperature, and observing physical distancing. He said election workers will be monitoring the voters' movement to ensure all SOPs are being complied with, while the voters are in the polling centres. In a statement today, he said hand sanitizer would be provided at all polling centres as the voters would be required to sanitize their hands at 4 stations, namely at the main entrance to the centre, at the entrance to the polling channel, at the polling station, before receiving their ballot papers, and before leaving the polling centre. Dato' Ikmalruddin said voters with COVID-19 symptoms would be allowed to cast their votes at a special tent monitored by health officials, while those categorized as patient, under investigation, and person under surveillance must obtain prior permission from the district health officer to go to the polling centre. He said the permission is subject to the risk assessment by the district health officer, and the voters must adhere to all guidelines set by the Ministry of Health. More than 2.5 million normal voters are expected to cast their votes in the state polls tomorrow at 1,021 polling centres statewide. The government has rebranded the government-linked companies, GLCs, and government-linked investment companies, GLICs, Disaster Response Network, GDRN, to GLC for the Rakyat and Nation, widening its scope from being humanitarian-based to include knowledge and prosperity-based. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Semasa said with its new scope, GDRN will spearhead corporate social responsibility efforts in a more consistent and orderly manner to optimize the combined resources of GLCs and GLICs to benefit both the B40 and other specific target groups.
Jalinan ilmu merangkumi beasiswa, peluang dan akses pendidikan serta pembangunan kemahiran insan, manakala jalinan sejahtera mengutamakan pembinaan kehidupan dari segi menjana pendapatan, membina kemahiran vokasional dan ilmu pengurusan keuangan serta memastikan kesejahteraan kesihatan dan alam sekitar.
The Premier noted that the government recognizes the need to improve the GDRN network's potential to make it responsive and more proactive in building the capacity and resiliency of Keluarga Malaysia. In the 2 years since 2020, Dato' Sri Ismail Sabri said the network has aided more than 450,000 people affected by the COVID-19 and floods by providing various types of assistance valued at 327 million ringgit, including government matching grants exceeding 55 million ringgit. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister said the government is committed to ensuring that permanent employees of GLCs and GLICs are paid at least 1,500 ringgit a month. He said out of concern for the people in tiding over the cost of living challenges, the government has ensured that all civil servants receive a total salary and allowance of at least 1,500 ringgit a month.
Tahap pendapatan minimum ini wajar diamalkan oleh sektor swasta bagi membantu pekerja menangani cabaran kos sara hidup, terutamanya bagi pekerja yang berpendapatan rendah.
The Premier also called on every listed GLC to achieve a level of female participation of at least 30% board members by the annual general meeting in 2023, which is in line with the international best practices. He said everyone should continuously recognize the role of women as important leaders and contributors to the country's socio-economic progress and prosperity. In Budget 2022, he said the government announced that all listed companies are required to appoint at least one female director before the 1st of June 2023. Tourism operators that repeatedly violate the standard operating procedures (SOPs) set by the Tourism, Arts and Culture Ministry (MOTAC) will be subject to stern action under the Tourism Industry Act 1992, Act 482. MOTAC, in a statement today, reminded all tourism operators that they must always comply with the SOPs to ensure smooth implementation of the National Recovery Plan. The MOTAC enforcement team has strengthened its preparedness so that Malaysians and foreign travellers can enjoy tour packages operated by licensed tour operators. This move was in line with the announcement of the reopening of the country's borders and the transition to the endemic phase of COVID-19 on 1st April. Under the Langkawi International Travel Bubble (LITB) SOP, which was introduced on 15 November last year, MOTAC said licensed tour companies can provide tour guide services with a maximum of 20 people throughout the tour itinerary. Meanwhile, the SOP for Umrah activities, updated on 17 February, stipulates that Umrah companies must appoint a person in charge to manage a group with 40 or more pilgrims. The person in charge will be responsible to control or manage pilgrims throughout the journey. While 4 groups of less than 40 pilgrims, the person in charge must manage them at the international gateways. Pulau Pinang will use the 3-week buffer period to ensure everything is in place to welcome international visitors to the state next month. Chief Minister Chow Kon Yeow said the state government, through the State Tourism and Creative Economy Committee Chairman Yeo Soon Hin, had started making the necessary preparations more than 2 months ago. He said numerous stakeholder engagement sessions with related agencies were held along with a visit to the Pulau Pinang International Airport, as well as ensure proper standard operating procedures (SOPs) in place for the borders reopening to be done in a safe manner.
Di 3 minggu ini diberikan untuk semua pihak menghalusi proses, prosedur dan sebagainya. Supaya kemasukan ini dapat dilaksanakan secara licin.
Elaborating further, Chow said although the necessary preparations are in place, it will also depend on international tourists and whether they are willing to enter the country or not during this period. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Semasa Yaakob recently announced that Malaysia was finally ready to reopen its international borders, which had remained closed for about 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as it enters a transitional phase into endemicity from 1st April. More police personnel will be stationed near the country's borders ahead of their 1st of April reopening, according to Dato' Hazani Ghazali. Now, the Bukit Aman Internal Security and Public Order Department Director said additional enforcement personnel would be deployed as the country prepares for the border reopening.
Kita dah ready untuk bukan kata ready, itu kerja kita pun, kerja kami pun. Okay, especially PGA. That's why saya gerakkan unit kuda pasukan simpanan persekutuan ke mana? Ke sempadan Kedah Perlis, dan juga saya gerakkan bulan depan ni akan bermula di sempadan Kelantan dengan negara jiran.
Briefing reporters today, he said even when the borders were closed, some smuggling activities were still detected. On 8th of March, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Semasa Yaakob announced that Malaysia will reopen its borders to international travellers on 1st of April. Dato' Hazani said this after witnessing the Royal Malaysia Police PDRM charity ride. And yet to come, 1 million ringgit allocated for Ampang landslide cleanup. Stay with us. Now, police today revealed the names of the 4 victims who perished and 1 who was injured in the landslide at Taman Bukit Permai 2, Ampang yesterday. Ampang Jaya Police Chief ACP Muhammad Farouk Ishak said all the deceased were taken to Ampang Hospital and had been identified by their family members.
Nama-nama mangsa yang terlibat adalah yang pertama iaitu Mahendra dan anak lelaki Arumugam berumur 36 tahun. Beliau adalah petugas kontraktor Syabas. Yang kedua, Cheng Kim Cheng berumur 85 tahun. Ini adalah warga emas yang cedera. Mangsa ketiga, Ramasami anak lelaki Ehin Napian berumur 58 tahun iaitu penghuni rumah juga meninggal dunia. Yang keempat, Muhammad Saiful Rizwan bin Ishaq berumur 37 tahun juga penghuni rumah meninggal dunia. Dan yang terakhir adalah Chong Siu Kim berumur 85 tahun menetap di rumah nombor 2 juga penghuni yang terjejas juga meninggal dunia.
ACP Muhammad Farouk said the police had been alerted that there were cracks and soil movement in the areas, and the police would like to advise the residents to adhere to the evacuation order to prevent any untoward incident. He said 30 policemen will continue with 24-hour monitoring, and the residents can lodge any report at the makeshift police booth in the area. A total of 1 million ringgit will be allocated for cleanup work at the Taman Bukit Permai landslide site in Ampang. Housing and Local Government Minister KPKT, Dr. Sri Rizal Naina American said the funds will be distributed by the ministry through the Ampang Jaya Municipal Council MP AJ.
Saya nak maklumkan bahawa komitmen daripada KPKT kita luluskan 1 juta untuk pembersihan. Agar bila mana dah selamat, bila mana dari segi analisa risiko telah disempurnakan oleh pihak-pihak berkaitan, Jabatan Cerun, Jabatan GNG dan sebagainya oleh Ikram, maka kata pembersihan boleh dilakukan secara cepat mungkin.
Met by reporters at the scene today, he said if the need arises, more funds will be added. He also urged the state government to complete the risk analysis as soon as possible so that the residents are informed. State National Security Council Chairman Tan Sri Noh Omar also urged that studies be conducted at the hills and elevated areas around the Ampang area to prevent future incidents. Especially in housing areas, he cited that the nation does not want another Highland Tower incident. Malaysia's wholesale and retail trade grew by 7.7% year-on-year to 120.5 billion ringgit in January 2022. According to the Department of Statistics, the growth was distributed to retail trade subsector, which recorded a positive growth of 7.3% to 49 billion ringgit. In a statement today, Chief Statistician Dato Sri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin said wholesale trade also expanded by 5.7% year-on-year to 58.6 billion ringgit, while motor vehicles surged 19.4% to 12.9 billion ringgit. He further noted that the retail trade subsector's growth in January 2022 was supported by retail sales in non-specialized stores, which expanded by 10.1% or 1.7 billion ringgit to 18.2 billion ringgit. He also said the index of retail sale over the internet for January this year recorded a 20.5% growth. In terms of volume, wholesale and retail trade for January 2022 registered a growth of 3.6%, attributed to the motor vehicles subsector, which increased 16.3%. Now, 4 businessmen, including one with the Dato title, were charged in the Shah Alam Sessions Court today with a total of 21 counts of money laundering involving millions of ringgit in connection with the issuance of temporary employment visit passes (PLKS). Dato Abdul Aziz Abdullah, 44, Muhammad Semail, 43, Muhammad Hariza Muhammad Yusuf, 34, and Abu Yazid Muhammad, 38, all pleaded not guilty to the charges read out before Judge Rosila Saleh. Dato Abdul Aziz was charged with 9 counts of money laundering, totaling over 2.6 million ringgit, including owning 4 branded watches, condominiums and apartments which are proceeds from unlawful activities. Muhammad was charged with using over 854,000 ringgit in the form of cash and checks, believed to be proceeds from unlawful activities, as payment for purchase of 2 luxury vehicles at 2 car dealers in Sungai Buloh and Kajang. As for Muhammad Hariza, he was charged with 6 counts of owning cash, house, watch and a luxury car, totaling over 1.023 million ringgit, as well as several foreign currencies which are believed to be proceeds from unlawful activities. Meanwhile, Abu Yazid was charged with 4 counts of owning cash of 44,400 ringgit, 7,900 in Saudi riyal, and 2 apartments believed to be proceeds from unlawful activities. Judge Rosila allowed all the accused to apply bail imposed by the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court yesterday, where the 4 accused were charged with similar offences. Yesterday, all the 4 accused, as well as Dato Abdul Aziz's sister, Hadita Abdullah, 47, pleaded not guilty in the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court to 81 counts of money laundering, involving millions of ringgit in connection with the syndicate issuing the temporary visitor work pass, PLKS. 20 players have been called up to join the Harimau Malaya futsal squad centralised training camp to fill 16 places in the final lineup for the AFF Futsal Championship 2022 in Bangkok, Thailand from the 2nd to the 10th of April. Football Association of Malaysia (FAM) said the performance of all 20 players was assessed during the Malaysia Premier Futsal League MPFL 2022 since 14 January by Chief Coach Chew Chun Yong. The centralised training camp will be conducted at Futsal Arena, Wisma FAM in Kelana Jaya starting on Wednesday. From 20 players called to the centralised camp, only 16 of them would be going to Bangkok on 26 March for several friendly matches before the championship begins. In the AFF Futsal Championship 2022, Malaysia were drawn in Group A with hosts and defending champions Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia and Brunei, while Group B features Vietnam, Myanmar, Timor-Leste and Australia. Malaysia will be opening the tournament against Cambodia on 2nd April, and the top 3 teams will qualify for the AFC Futsal Asian Cup 2022 in Kuwait in September. This evening's news at 10. In our top story, over 2.5 million Johorians to vote in state polls tomorrow. Join us again at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon. Until then, it's lights out. I'm Brendan Lupal. Take care, have a great weekend, and salam keluarga Malaysia.